Hey there, and welcome once again to the BBA today. I believe this episode 102. Is it 102 or 103? I've lost track of my numbers already. We're only in the early 100s, and it is opening day in the Brewster. It is open. Can I say that again? It is opening day in the Brewster. I am Ron Collins. I am the general manager of the Brewster Baseball Association's Bikini Krill, and I have with me again Kurt Imber, the general manager of the San Fernando Bears. Welcome, Kurt. Happy opening day. Yeehaw, and all of that other good stuff.
Happy opening day, Ron. It's not an April Fool's joke. It really is. It's here finally. We've got some really good momentum going. I feel like there's lots of people doing cool stuff on the boards,
Yeah.
and previews are happening. We're really excited to see the media guide that you're putting together, and hopefully this podcast can tide some people over until then.
There you go. Yeah, it should be another fantastic media guide, but they're all fantastic in their own ways. I just wanted to mention here as we get started here that one of the things that I personally am so excited about in version 26 is the great new accuracy that they have come up with the preseason predictions this year that show my Bikini Krill taking its rightful position at the top of the Pacific Division. I cannot believe they've gotten so good at making these projections. It's just like the best news of all, right? So absolutely enjoying all of the preseason predictions right now. Would love to actually get your take on this, because not only do the Bikini Krill show up at the very, very top of the Pacific. Did I mention that? The Bikini Krill are at the top of the Pacific, which only makes sense. We also see Charlotte at the top of the Atlantic. Now that makes maybe some sense because obviously they won the division last year. First time in almost a decade that Charm City had not won. But I look at a lot of our BBA GM polls, and Charlotte doesn't even show up on the radar screen. And then Phoenix, we've talked about Phoenix a couple of times. I think you're very high on Phoenix. I'm very excited about Phoenix's story, but OOTP's prediction mechanism says that Phoenix will be taking the Frontier, and the only incumbent that we see in the predictions are Nashville, which I think a vast majority of people would suggest that Nashville is probably the top guy there. What are your thoughts when you take a look at these predictions?
Well, I think you're joking a little bit, and I actually think like the predictions are pretty good. Actually, they basically make sense, like 1 through 7 in every division, and then I get to the last team in the division, and I go, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that team. That doesn't make any sense." I don't think Jacksonville is going to lose 96 games. I'd be pretty surprised if Mexico City loses 98 games. I really don't think Des Moines is going to lose 98 games in the Heartland. Long Beach, they might lose 96 games in the Pacific. I don't know. We'll have to see what Lane has up his sleeve. But no, I mean, otherwise, they kind of make sense. And hey, I'm not going to complain about them either because they have my Bears in a wild card spot, and I would be elated to take a wild card spot. And my other thought is just, yes, very validating on the Phoenix front. I'm probably being slightly tongue-in-cheek about it, but I really do think they're a playoff team. So it's going to be my thing, I think. I'm going to be rooting on the Talons all year because I want it to happen. I heard Kamish kind of try to brush that off when he recorded with you. And so now I feel like me and Kamish have this thing where I need to prove myself that the Talons really are for real.
There you go. Yeah, I think, let me get that swapped over here. Interesting. Yeah, like I said, I'm a big, for the fun factor, I love seeing Phoenix at the top of this division. I'm not certain that they're going to be, it's possible that they will win. I don't think they'll win the division by 8 games like the predictions are are giving them. And of course, one of the issues with Out of the Park's predictions at this time is they're looking at the rosters as they stand right now. And so, my guess on things like Jacksonville being down so far is that for whatever reason, Out of the Park is utilizing, maybe Aaron was starting some guys in some places or something like that. You don't know as far as that goes. But yeah, they're interesting. They've got Cobble Hill at 73 wins. I think that would both annoy and thrill Shoeless as far as that goes, because I think he clearly is taking a flyer with a new method of putting a team on the field, and he's hopeful that it's going to work out well for him. I'm not sold yet, but I like that 73 wins as a over-under kind of thing for Cobble Hill. That's interesting, right? I see Austin sitting at 84 wins. I think that's a little bit, that feels a little bit optimistic. I see Rosenblatt at 78. I have no idea what to really make of Rosenblatt. They seem like they have increased things quite heavily. That is quite an interesting division. I'm still not sold that Nashville is going to win by the 13 games that that the projections are showing Heartland, and I am expecting that I will change. Well, I'm not going to go any further on. I've got some things in the media guide that I've been working on for the past couple of days. I'm doing the Heartland projections as well as the Pacific projections this year, and so that's going to be. I'm rethinking a lot of the things based on a couple of moves here. The Sharperson signing for Nashville is an interesting one. I can't really tell if Shepperson makes Nashville really better or not. And that's really hard to say from a guy who's a 3 or 4 WAR hitter, right? But he's a hardcore left-handed bat, struggles against left-handed pitchers, and that club's already like the best offensive club in the league. If you had a choice between Lololo and Shepperson for a Nashville fan, I think you'd take Lololo rather than Shepperson, right? So, so I'd be interested. I would have been interested to see this prediction cycle flow if Shepperson were not on the team. I'd be interested in that situation. I like the fact that you see Louisville up there. I like that you see Chicago up there. I agree with you. I don't see Des Moines losing 98 games. That's almost certainly some kind of a reflection on what players were up and being used. I do see Long Beach suffering at this stage. I think things are in trouble for them. And the one thing that I will say that I like the most about the Pacific projections is that most of the teams are all clumped pretty well together. I think Sacramento is down too far, but fundamentally what it's got is in their projections, the top, 5 teams are all within 7 games. So, I mean, they're throwing darts. Now, obviously, they got it right with Bikini. So, I can't complain about that too much.
Yeah, so Shepperson, let's go back to Nashville first. He's got those huge platoon splits, so the first place my mind goes is that whole topic of like, what are platoon splits going to look like in the new game? Because all of a sudden the ratings have just really moved in opposite directions. But I think it mostly just makes Nashville deeper. It makes it harder for them to add a salary mid-season. So they better hope that where they need depth is like where Shepperson helps them. They have a ton of pitching in their farm, so I think that's what Chad's thought process is. Is like he has the pitching internal. He can move lots of his pieces around. He's got pretty flexible defensive players. So Shepperson is like depth, and now he's got Joffer on the trade block, or Joffer's going to be an incredible pinch runner, a 4 WAR pinch runner. So
It's like Herb Washington all over again.
yeah, book and hit. Um, the projection just reflects, I think, the fact that like their Pythag base last year was 115 wins. So I mean, this is a 10-win drop from last year.
Mhm.
My gut feeling is kind of like yours. It's never been quite as far in the direction that I think you're kind of steering, but like logically, mathematically, number crunching, like are they really more than 10 wins worse than they were last year? Now, especially now they add Shepperson. The projection thing has them giving up 50 more runs than last year.
Mhm.
I don't know. That sounds about right. They drop a little low, but they have a ton of pitching in their system, and then the offense being slightly better. Well, yeah, they added Shepperson. They had a few disappointing seasons offensively last year. They have that first baseman who's bumped a ton power wise.
Right.
Blanking on his name, but go look it up. They have an 11 potential power first baseman. So yeah, like I don't know. I think Twin Cities looks a little light. Is probably like where the gap could be closed. I could see Twin Cities being more between 95 and 100 wins, but the wins have to come from somewhere, and there's just a lot of parity. I feel like right now, a lot of teams in the mix in most of the divisions. So if Des Moines is going to win 20 or 30 more games than's listed,
They got to come
those
from
have to
somewhere.
come from somewhere. Yeah, and they're not coming from the Pacific, right, Ron? We're going
Of
to be
course.
over 500 against the Heartland this year. So I don't know where they're gonna make it up.
Yeah, and I think that's the root of my questioning on the Nashville performance is not so much that Nashville has gotten 5 or 10 or however many games worse. I think their talent is still obviously elite, as shown in the projections. But like you say, I think that the rest of the division is continuing to grow stronger, Twin Cities in particular. I mean, if we say Twin Cities 92 is a little light, they should be maybe 98, right? Or 95, or whatever you pick that number. Des Moines is light, they should be at least 85, I would think, maybe a little more. So you add up all of those numbers. Louisville might be light. They've added enough pitching that their offense should be strong. Chicago may or may not be about right. Yellow Springs, I would say, might be light just looking at their team, but again, in context of their division, that might be right, or maybe even down a little. I don't know. Madison might be optimistic at 68 right now with all the rest of that. That may be where a lot of those wins come from, but I don't think they're going to find 30 wins in Madison.
No.
So they've got to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And, that basically just means that Nashville can't coast. I mean, when they're winning 115 and 120 games a season, they're coasting at certain points. So, really interesting set of projections. Obviously, take them for the grain of salt that they're worth. Except Bikini plays in a place surrounded by salt water, and so by definition, you pretty much have to take that 92 wins to the bank for Bikini, I think. But there's all sorts of other things going on. Obviously, this is opening day. Guys on Discord are talking about trying to cut their rosters down. I know I'm down to 39 right now. I still have to return a Rule 5, so I'll be down to 38. So I've got, that makes it 11 more guys I need to move around. I've got an injured minor leaguer that's down to 10, so I've got some more decisions to make. I know everyone is talking about doing that. We've had development lab stuff going on. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the development lab. I don't think we've done that much through these BBA todays. When you scan development lab things, what kind of things have you been seeing? All of the players who've been through them will be debuting their new skills here in April. Very exciting to see how things go. What are you thinking?
Well, I think the pattern everybody's following is You got to do the long programs right up front. You can't reverse the order. A couple of teams have graciously learned that lesson on our behalf. So a lot of teams are finishing up, I think, mostly defensive stuff
Hmm.
with the opening day sim here coming up. Some folks do some base running fundamentals and whatnot, but learn new position. But I bet 80 or 90% are defensive labs, and those are listed as hard, but just kind of seeing some of the results around the league, it doesn't seem like the results have changed necessarily from what they were in the past. It's still something where, I don't know, 3 of your 10 are going to be successes. 3.5 would be my guess is like the mean, and then there's a spread where like sometimes it's 0, 1, 2, and sometimes it's upwards of like 7 successes. And I think I had like 3 successes. I haven't seen anybody post anything that was like super detrimental on the defensive front. It's good. I don't really want people's defenses to be falling apart. I know we differ in opinion a little bit on the like base skill labs. I don't think you like things kind of falling apart on people there, but I kind of think it reflects reality to some degree. If somebody tries to like retool their swing, sometimes it messes them up. I think Corbin Carroll in the major leagues tried to like retool his swing last year, and supposedly that's what threw him off for a couple of months. He had to like go back to his old swing, and he was really struggling. So maybe
Yeah.
it should be a temporary change instead of a permanent change. I could hear that argument in a skill set, but I mean, that's kind of like what happened with Espinoza on Long Beach. I feel bad for Lane. Um,
Yeah.
he's got probably not a great team this year, but he's got one really good player in Gustavo Espinoza who has 9 power, and now it's 9 power potential, but only 7 current powers. Hopefully that comes back in at some point for him. But in the meantime, he looks like a lesser player on opening day.
Yeah, and I think that actually is an interesting point because one of the things I have been, um, humans are pattern matching creatures, and I am subject to that to a very great degree because I'm constantly looking at results and trying to figure out what's going on. And I also have a skeptic's frame of mind when it comes to listening to out of the park development folks, right? For all the good-hearted nature and whatnot, when they say something, they oftentimes don't either say it completely or say it correctly because they're just responding to something, and human beings are not precise creatures. Um, I really ponder that point of whether we see development lab things hit and then regress one way or the other, right? So, yes, there is a non zero chance in my brain that guys like Espinosa, who have taken a major hit, will work their way back to something closer to where they were, right? I agree with your point that it is not unrealistic that somebody can go to a dev lab, something like that, and um, twist their brain in knots and suddenly not be able to perform well. In the game, there are obviously, the yips and things like that. Case Khalil Green is a guy, and Steve Sachs and Mackie Sasser and Bill Blass, and obviously it happens where something gets in a player's brain and they just fall off the ability to play at least a piece of baseball. So all of those work. But I am definitely intrigued by the idea. I've seen some things that suggest, for example, the other you hear that little email that comes in is interestingly worded when there's no improvement, or sometimes it'll have some comment to say, "Hey, you can never tell what's really going on," right? Because I know I have had some cases where I've had a player not improve in something that I sent them to, and then 2 months later they're getting development bumps, at least ratings bumps anyway, in those categories. And so it makes me wonder, is that just random? I don't know. Um, I had 10 guys going through defensive things in Bikini, and we had 7 of them succeed, 3 outstandings and 4 successes. But it's an interesting situation because, for example, I had Keith Williams on track after the first defensive sim, excelling after the second defensive sim, and then no improvement, right? So it looks like he's on this upward trajectory, and then at the very end, he's nothing, right? So what do these waypoint things mean? I don't know. I mean, I had David Castillo excelling in the first one, on track in the second one, and then in quotes just successful in the third one. Great. What's the I don't know what the path is. But I'm like I said at the beginning of the off season, I have come to find a great deal of fun out of using the development lab, even if it risks 1 out of 40 players or something crashing horribly. And I don't even think it's that. Who was it a couple of seasons back had a player go through and get ripped up. But if you think you've got 32 teams, at least 20 players per dev lab times 32 teams is 640 dev lab opportunities. If 2 guys crash, then it's 2 out of 640 across the league. That's probably realistic.
Yeah. And when it's a lesser guy, nobody really even talks about it or cares. But when it's a guy who's an all-star caliber player, then it's just crushing. Especially when it happens to non-Nashville teams, then we all really feel bad for that GM.
I know if it were only so that it would happen to the Nashville teams, everyone would probably have a wake. I think for those guys, because we all want Nashville to succeed at all steps. There's no question about that. So yeah, I do think that it has also been interesting to see the evolution of the way teams are looking at using those long programs and short programs, whether they're throwing actual prospects in or not, right? I don't know.
Yeah, you index pretty young. I'm looking at these players that succeeded, and they're all 20, 21, 22 years old. So I want to take something away from that, but then I think I succeeded with like a 26-year-old, and all my 19-year-olds failed. So
right.
Really small sample. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but between that and like you said, it like bouncing back and forth with the updates, it's just really hard to draw conclusions from, and that's probably a good thing. I don't know, kind of keeps it fun. That's probably why you're enjoying it. If we totally understood it, that wouldn't be as great. The other aspect of it is that email you get. It's nice that you don't have to go cross-reference the dev report, but it'll tell you it increased something by 1, but it doesn't mean you went from 5.5 to 6.5. It might mean you went from 5.8 to 6.1.
Right.
And then other stuff will say less than 1. And if you went from 5.1 to 5.9, well, that was actually the bigger success. So there's like that fog of war mystery as well.
Yeah.
You'll never know.
Right. You never know. And that has a Venn diagram overlap with another topic that we've talked about a couple of times, and maybe we could talk about in more detail. Questions about the relief pitcher conversions and things like that. Because so much of the game now that Out of the Park has been fairly successful at compressing the players into those 4, 5, 6, 7 rating bars rather than spread out. There's not nearly as many elite sounding, rated players. So yeah, when I will see, I have seen people talking a lot about whether relief pitcher conversions have become less valuable or not. And I think you actually asked me that question back several episodes ago, and I kind of punted on it because I hadn't actually looked at the math. But you get that same thing, right? If you're a 7 stuff and you convert 3 pitches and you go from 7.1 to 7.9, it still only shows as 7. That's still a pretty hefty bump, right? If you're at 7.6 and you go to 8.4 with that same improvement, then obviously you'll show as an 8 rather than a 7. And with I've actually gone through and I've done some of that math now, and I think fundamentally it still works essentially, everything should essentially be the same, but now the top end of the scale is expanded or compressed depending on how you want to view that. So it will, I think, sometimes look like it is nerfing the top end just a little bit. You may not get where you used to get maybe an 11 stuff, maybe now you get a 10 or a high 9 or something like that. Just depends on the number of pitches that you're converting and things like that.
Aren't the high bands, they're not as wide as the middle numbers, right? Like a 7 only has, I forget what you guys call them, but like 10 points or something, and 5 has like 50 points in the range. So wouldn't it be true to say also that you're more likely to go from like 7 to 8 than from 5 to 6? Do I understand that correctly, you think?
I need to be a little bit careful because I went through and I calculated. I used the editor and I collected what the band widths are, and I think I'm off by a couple of points one way or the other. But yeah, the gap between going from a low 5 to a high 5 is 56 points when I last did it, right? Going from a low 6 to a high 6 is 25 points, so there's half the bandwidth there, right? And that stayed at 24 points, going from a 6 to a 7, 7 to an 8, 8 to a 9, and then up to 10, it's 38 points, right? So at that stage, if you're a 9.1 and you get a 30-point bump, you're going to go to the 10 range,
Right.
right? But if you're at a 10.1 and you get a 30-point bump, you may not see that change the bar at all, just because the gap is bigger. So the gaps are not linear anymore, but they're very linear between 6, 7, 8, and 9. So the reliever conversion should outwardly appear to be identical in the 7, 8, 9 areas, will appear to be less powerful in the 9, 10, 11, 12 areas. That's just how the math works.
I think the most popular conversions, though, are guys with like 4 or 5 stuff, maybe, like guys who are control or movement specialists, and because the only thing it really improves is the stuff, so you're trying to like add stuff to those guys, and so the conversions aren't going to look very good. When guys go from low 5 to high 5, you don't see it. I think that probably has like a huge impact on their ability, but you don't get to see the like big number and the blue number or whatever. And so I think that's what happened a little bit. I think it's still probably a decent strategy. We've seen a few slightly more successful conversions later in this offseason, so I think it's still alive, still relevant. Are you still considering it with a couple of your guys?
I thought about it really hard for Steve Truss and Herman Descartes. I have decided not to, simply because if I were to convert one of them, then I'm going to commit to having them in the bullpen all year, and right now I'm not sure I have the slots really that I need them in that position. So most likely, I'm thinking I will probably go ahead and have Nelson Williams be my number 4 guy, and then I will probably shuttle Truss and Descartes up and down as the 5th starter, depending on whether I want a lefty or a righty, and then drop them on low pitch counts to try to protect from too many innings with those not comfortable movement. Not comfortable.
Oh, no. Yeah, just throw those guys out there. You can pitch both of them against me.
I'm having a feeling that they may not be appearing too much at Chico Bailbon's ballpark.
I'm gonna get a bullpen day. You're gonna mow me down with your army of relievers.
So, yeah, I'm that whole question about what the dev lab actually does, what actual relief conversions do, is very much mixed up and tied into that +1, -1, kind of thing. I mean, for example, I had a was it Thomas Ramos, center fielder, had a excellent, right, and so it's his range and arm, range and error, range and arm, range and two of them said it was less than 1, but they were already 9s and 8s. So, at the end of the day, that means they picked up less than. All that means is they picked up less than 24 points because I don't know where they were, right? And then the one that was 7, it was a +1. So by definition, that player gained, was either on the edge.
Right, that's what you don't know.
Right, yeah, you just don't really know, right? But it was listed as outstanding, so one would expect there was a substantial number. But that means the substantial number couldn't be any more than 48, and I doubt that, because it would have to go from the lowest 7 to the highest 8 to be the maximum. So all you can really say, if you really know the stuff inside, all you can really say it was less than 48 points. But you have to actually watch the performance. I love that aspect of this fog of war thing on our rating scales. And I can't seem to get people who are heavy deep into the whole scouting idea of out of the park to understand that there is a massive amount of fog of war when it comes to showing ratings at this level. And if you wanted to increase the fog of war, rather than go to scouts, just go to the 1 to 5 scale rather than the 1 to 10 scale. And then you increase the fog of war by 2, a factor of 2. And that just means you have to actually watch what your players are doing. And
just be stats only at that point. 1 to 5. I mean, that wouldn't tell you anything hardly.
Yeah, it would become very, very, very close to stats only.
Yeah.
So, what else do we got? I'm looking forward to the opening day and opening month, really, waiver wire. I think that is equating to our conversations about Rule 5. I think that we're going to see a lot of middle-level teams and lower getting better through the month of April and into May as the waiver wire starts to clear. I haven't actually looked at the waiver wire here this past sim. Have you looked at that at all? It's completely empty?
It's empty right now. Yeah. So I'll save you the clicks.
Okay, well, that's going to change.
Yeah, that's going to be, I don't even remember the number. It'll be more than 50 players, won't it? I want to say. I just remember that being a whole chore on its own, is just trying to review those guys.
Yeah, wouldn't be too surprising. It would not be surprising if the waiver wire is not heavily populated for a sim or two, though, because I think a lot of people use the short-term DFA as a way to protect against injury. Pardon me.
And we've got some out-of-option guys that have been discussed from the early, before the gun IFA signings from a few years ago. I'm curious to see if Austin rosters both of the guys that they have. Those might be the only 2 decisions. I think there were like 5 players, but one of them has like faded, isn't really a prospect. Another one has an option for some reason. So there'll be a little bit of that. There's people that make decisions on Rule 5 players. So you can waive those guys. I don't know if there's any benefit from it. I just know I got a guy who had Rule 5 restrictions off waivers one of my earliest years in the league. So some of those guys can show up, and that's kind of weird. And then there's just going to be, I would expect to start seeing a lot of players on the trade block, like Shulis, posted on there this morning that he's open to talk about any of your players that you think you're going to get nothing for. What can he send your way to make it worth your while? So we could see like a flurry of little trades as well, which would minimize the size of the waiver wire.
Yeah, and that actually fits, the concept that I think that some of the less talented teams could find some inventive ways to pick up some guys, be it straight from the waiver wire or, like you just said, if you put in the sweat equity and you start talking with a few folks up in front and can make a deal for it, for a guy, that's great. I mean, Austin's is an interesting case. Petru Marinis, I think, is one of the guys in question.
Number 2 prospect, I think,
Yeah,
in the latest list. He's getting headlines.
Right. So if Austin were to try to slip Petru Marinis,
Number 3.
He's Romanian. I don't know how you pronounce Marinis. If he were to try to, as we're exposing light into the situation, but it doesn't really matter. The league is too aggressive right now for this to actually matter. But if he were to try to slip him through waivers in hopes that he could pull him off the 40-man and slide him, back down into his minor league organization, I'm going to guess that somebody else would pick him up. Not the least of the reason is once you pick somebody up on waivers, the out of the park doesn't do that particularly well, and I believe that then that team would put them in their minors without any ramification, which sucks, but that's just how the game works.
I don't think so, Ron. I think it would make you stick him on your active roster.
Would it?
I think the player has to clear waivers. Yeah, that's always been my experience.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm just thinking Rule 5. But if that's the case, then yeah, would Valencia go ahead and stack him in their majors? I wouldn't doubt it. Would Cobble Hill? I mean, that's the kind of thing that Shoeless would chortle over and enjoy all season long to see what happened, right? I'm guessing that it would be disastrous from a performance standpoint because, the guy is clearly not developed to play.
He's not ready for A-ball, let alone.
He's going to struggle in R-ball, really. Let's see, he hit 210 in rookie last year in his 4th year of rookie, which is the fundamental problem with bringing young IFA players up to begin with, and these guys' origin, they were forced to come up into rookie ball as 16-year-olds, and that's really difficult. I mean, you look at Marinis's record, his batting average is 126 in his first year, 162 in his second.
He's been improving.
Yeah, 200 and 210. Well, that's one of the things that I love about the game, and you can actually tell from the stat lines if a reasonable amount of sample size, you can literally watch your young kids grow and the ratings grow by looking at the stats, right? That's why stats only will work and can be played and is a lot of fun if you're really able to be that fervently dedicated into looking at all of the players all of the time. You can actually figure those things out because the ratings actually matter. Right now, so anyway,
but based on Chuck missing out on his free agents and then going over the limit in IFA spend this year, I think he's going to roster Marinis. There's another player too. I don't remember his name. There's another guy. He's got two. I want to say he's more like a 50, 55 potential or something. So another good prospect, but it'll be really tough to have 2 guys on your active roster and be competitive. That will really limit the flexibility. You can kind of hide one, like we already have bigger rosters by one than like Major League Baseball does, but 2 guys, and then you get some injuries and like stuff starts to get kind of rough. So that's where that preseason prediction that the game generated with 84 wins for Austin, I don't think it knows that these guys are going to, I think they're going to stick on the active roster, and that kind of means Austin's punting for the year.
Yeah. They'd have to roster two of them means basically that you have to really hope that the injury monster doesn't hit you, and that you can keep your main players out on the field for the whole time, right? So, I mean, anything can happen, but 162 games is a very, very long season. That's what makes baseball so cool and beautiful and whatnot, is you got to play all season long.
And that's why we're all excited for the box scores to start showing up. Get that waiver wire cleared out, get the ball rolling.
There you go. So,
what else would you like to discuss, Rob?
Actually, you put a note on our little. We were chatting, and you put a note about Shoeless's comments on fan interest.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more, because I miss Shoeless's comments on fan interest, and it's a topic that I'm paying a great deal of interest to. I've been sleeping, you know.
I love, you did this too when you were taking over Seattle and turning them into Bikini, but Shulis is writing these posts about what his thought process is and what he's doing in his rebuild. And if you're a newer GM, which we don't have very many of, but if you're a GBC GM or something and you're getting introduced to the league or online leagues for the first time, it's always a really good resource to read what these very experienced folks are up to. And I can't remember even the exact context. I think Shulis just brought it up in his post, but like he just said, like, he just refuses to just make transactions that are kind of purely out of fan interest purposes. And his finances, he's got like a 30-something fan interest, and I think maybe Alan or somebody, kind of told him, like, your real struggle isn't going to be winning. He said he wants to win 82 games. I think 72 games or 73, like the prediction has, is more realistic. But that's one thing. But just getting the finances fixed is another. And you are going through that too, still in Bikini. Like you have one of the best farm systems now. You're predicted to win the Pacific, so apparently you're going to win the Pacific. You've made the playoffs a couple times, so you've done a lot of good things in Bikini, but you have not really fixed the finances yet, and you've been going at that for like 6 or 7 years now. So Shulis might have a similar challenge in front of him, but like I'm with him. Like I just don't want to make. I want to make moves to try to win baseball games, and that's not necessarily like the smart strategy to like win at this what is ultimately a computer game. You got to have the finances to back you up long term. And he was just kind of saying, like, he wishes, like, the game, if you're in a playoff race, teams should have 100 fan interest. Like, what else is there that's more exciting as a fan than your team being in a playoff race? And the game, the new version seems to have fixed kind of the loophole of, like, sign an over-the-hill guy to a minor league contract and get 2 fan interest points every time you sign washed up Manny Ramirez or whatever. Which I think is good, but it's still very sensitive to, like, if you're going to bring in a guy on a major league contract, there's an incentive right now to choose like, if you've got 2 players, all else is equal, you should pick the more popular player. I had a situation this year where I had like only a few roster spots, and it was like, well, I can take, like, I felt like they were lesser players, but take popular players and put them on my team to try to fill a couple spots I had, or you get like the better baseball player. And I just also I just totally agree with Shulis. Like I want to put the best team out there, and then I want to grow my fan base organically from winning. The game doesn't seem to work that way. Like, you and I both have like fairly successful teams over the last 5 years. We're not. We just kind of backed into the wild card a couple times. Nothing incredible, but like we're behind a bunch of teams in fan interest that have been not very good for several years. To some degree, I think that can be realistic to real life. Like I used to give a bunch of my friends who are like Cleveland fans a bunch of shit because like nobody would go to Cleveland Indians games,
Hmm.
uh, and they've been a pretty successful team, but they're a small market team, so some part of that is just a reflection of the like population of the area, and that's not how our game is set up. We've changed, especially when Matt updated it. Like everybody's market size is the same, I think, so that shouldn't be the reason. So it's just doesn't seem like the game is as responsive to on-field success, and it doesn't even have to be that season. You don't have to go to 100 just because you're on the wild card race. But if a team has mostly avoided losing a lot of games, it seems like they should be above teams that have missed the playoffs for like 5 straight years. And instead, it's still very dependent on the players you sign and the names you trade in, and as a Reds fan, like I know the value of that. Like the Reds, when I was a kid, acquired Ken Griffey Jr., and I think they like sold tickets for years off of acquiring Ken Griffey Jr. So it makes sense to me with like the very best players. You know, Max Shepperson should have given somebody a bump, but to need to pick the seventh reliever in my bullpen who's popular instead of the seventh reliever who I thought was going to give up less home runs in Chico Bail Bonds Stadium. I wanted the guy who's going to give up less home runs, and I think I should be rewarded for that, but I don't think the game does that. Rant over.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really valuable rant, and there's um, a lot of junk to go through every time you start thinking about fan interest. And I mean, I go through cycles over my way too many years of working through and with and around OTP. Um, just cut to the chase. In my opinion, version 25 just absolutely broke fan interest as far as I'm concerned. I think they were attempting to do a good thing because, um, in all the versions up through 24, that all the recent versions through 24, all modern day versions, this thing where you can sign decrepit out of the out of the box veterans and get a fan boost was also broken, right? I mean, I think that is. I think it would be completely fair to say that if the Reds had signed Joey Votto in that last year, they probably would have sold some more tickets, but it wouldn't have gone like, right? It just,
Right.
unlike when they signed Ken Griffey, it went, well, I mean, that you're signing Ken Griffey in the years where he's still, you squint and you could say he's at his peak, right? But he wasn't. And in fact, then he started getting hurt and all that other good stuff. Um, you look at a team like Tampa Bay, who for years were winning like mad, but not drawing any fans, right? Which is why they're talking about moving, because at the end of the day, if you can't draw fans, and they're in a market that should be able to draw fans. I mean, they ought to, but they don't, right? Why? Because their analytics people get people who can play the game rather than people who are known. That is one supposition, right, that could or who knows whether that's true or not. The ultimate point there is I don't really have a problem with the idea of a lower team signing popular players, but yeah, you should never be able to make a bump when you sign a guy to play AAA. That's not. Or if pick up $100,000 in merchandising in 3 weeks and then it's gone. I mean, pick that can be kind of whatever.
Yeah.
The point there is that the impacts are just have been completely out of whack, and so they become very gamey. But teams have used that for Allen is fun to listen to sometimes because he will make sarcastic and snide remarks about a team doing that. But Allen did that with Brooklyn, as I recall, back in the day, and he did it, I believe, with Twin Cities a little bit. I don't really know because I wasn't around for much of his takeover and rebuild as far as that goes. Ted totally tore that team down, and then I believe that Alan came in and picked it up and made it work. So they are just game oriented. You're gaming the system. Kudos to Shoeless. I absolutely love having Doug in the league because of his commitment to ideas. Right? He's an idealistic human being and has a heart that follows that. If you've not listened to any of his Brewster Opine, how do you, I can't remember. If you have not listened to any of his little 10-minute podcasts that he was doing for a period of time, they are some of the most brilliant pieces ever. If you listen to, you will not waste any of your time going back and listening to those because they explain the heart of the game. So I love what Shoeless is doing there. And to be direct, when I took over Bikini and I started doing that, I was feeding those things directly back to the development folks, right, and out of the park. I am probably, in that sense, if not the reason, one of the huge reasons why Out of the Park 25 broke the game, because I kept pushing them, saying, "Hey, look what I'm doing here. I just signed 3 40-year-old decrepit guys to AAA, and my fan interest went up 9,000 points." Right? Sometimes you have to do that kind of thing and present it to the devs to have them do anything. So my personal opinion, and I'm talking out of school, is that in version 25 they just decided to make a change, and I don't know that they tested that particularly well. I know I did a really crappy job of testing it because I very rarely actually go through and play season by season kind of things. I do a different kind of testing for them. So in my opinion, it was a highly under-tested change and under-tested feature, and I think the game paid for it. Because, when they put that in place, my fan interest went from pretty high down to nothing, and then winning didn't seem to help it as much. So we've been feeding that back. We'll see what version 26 does. They've told us, the development folks have said fan interest was a point of emphasis in their process. And again, I have not tested it, so I don't know what to expect, but they have pinky swear promised that it will be better. All that I would really guess is it will be different, and we'll have to play for a season or 3 and get a flavor for how we like that. But I will let everyone know that I feed this stuff back, and if they make a change, they make a change. And I think that the rest of there's 4 or 6 of us that are in the Brewster that are on the beta group, and we do our best to say what's going on.
We'll have to just see how it plays out. That's part of the excitement with this season. It's our first season in the new game, and I feel like there's always 1 or 2 things we don't anticipate that kind of pop up by the middle of the year that we start seeing. So we'll have to see if it responds to that. My whole thing is just stop making middle relievers very popular. Save it for a few corner cases. Real life, there are goofy guys who become popular, so that a little bit of randomness is fine, but otherwise it should be star players who have performed, and a team that just adds 5 middling 45 overall but popular players in an offseason shouldn't shoot up 15 points, while teams that have more success are sitting there in their dust. So we'll see what happens.
And therein lies the other root of the problem is when you look, you go down your list of minor league players, and you find guys that are intensely popular and other guys that are not, and you go, well, why? I got no idea. I can understand. Occasionally, I think it's interesting, you'll see a guy who gets drafted high first round draft pick will flip from unknown to very popular. That makes sense. If a team picks a scintillating guy everyone wants to see him, right? And then, of
Yeah.
course, all the fans start saying, "Oh, he ought to go straight to the majors," and
Call him up. Call him up.
right. So that's the breakage to me begins with the idea that nobody players wind up being popular or not popular, or what how players get tagged with popularity is probably needs a lot of rework.
Yeah.
It's
It
kind of
just
like the same
sticks
kind of thing with the
forever.
injury fatigue, injury code. How players get tagged with fragile when they haven't had any injuries is okay. What you're telling me is their body type is messed up, but he's 6'2", 200 pounds. I don't know.
Should have slept on a better mattress, I guess.
That's right. But that all goes into this. At the end of the day, you do your best, and then it's a comic book world, right? That's the final answer for a lot of these things. Is it is a game. You have to. It is a game. It's
Yeah.
an independently published game with 2 or 4 guys doing all the coding. It's not like they've got a 300-person development team there to go through and fix everything. At some point, you go, well, they're doing their best. And literally, this is, speaking from my heart, the best game ever made. I mean, I've spent 25 years roughly playing this game, so it has provided me way more excitement and enjoyment than any other game in the world. And I would try to bring this around into the BBA universe, and where you were kind of going. One of the things that I'm really excited about is so many guys on Discord and on their forum posts, which I'm now again a couple of days behind on, seem to be buzzing about how interesting this season is going to be. I think we have 32 highly energized general managers all working on their teams at the same time, and even the teams that are rebuilding on the low end. Greg and Valencia. I think Greg and Valencia is going to surprise some people. I think Long Beach has some issues. Obviously, Doug is doing a bunch of things in Cobble Hill. Mike in Madison has been showing great signs of doing a lot of work, but he's got a lot of work to do. The point being is you got 32 guys that are all really interested and dedicated right now, and that's going to make this season. I can feel it in the way people are talking about, and it's one of the most exciting moments in a preseason that I personally have had. I am really looking forward to seeing what the Brewster Baseball Association does this year.
Yeah.
So,
I count like 25 different teams that it would surprise me if they make the playoffs. Just like scroll on the list, and then to your point, a bunch of the teams that are rebuilding are like very engaged GMs who are like very kind of like publicly sharing their rebuild, and they're all doing it the right way, and they're working like harder probably than the teams that are in the mix. And that's always cool. And you kind of want to mix too. Like you kind of want some. Like, it's more interesting when teams are in like different spots in the cycles and stuff. So that's part of what makes the fabric of all of this so interesting, I think.
yeah, and for me, the metagame, re-exposing my thoughts on all the finances. I'm really I would like to think that the changes that we have made, that primarily Matt has checked off on, with dropping the salary cap down and more leveling the playing field with the classic media guide stuff going on. Some of the rule changes that we put in place over the past couple of weeks, months, game months. I think that what the result will be, and I personally think we've got another 2 seasons to go through before some of those completely level out. But I think we saw the beginning of it last year, and I think you're going to see even more churn in the middle. that teams are picking things up and the revenue streams start to come in. We're seeing a lot of teams playing with lower payrolls, which means they're as long as they can continue to compete with those low payrolls due to some of the young players,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see a lot more. We're going to see a lot of teams that have, you talk 25 deep. We're going to see a lot of teams that have reasonable chances at competing for playoff positions most years. Not that we won't still have the behemoths, right? We also want behemoths. We want churn. We want the bad guys. We want we want some guys.
It's all part of the stew.
Yeah, we want some guys that are completely having to tear up and deciding, okay, I'm going to fall back and get going again. This is really an exciting time period. I am absolutely, every time I open the game up and I start looking at another team, as I was doing some of the media guide previews, it was hard not to get excited about every single team that I was previewing because there's something going on for every single team. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I felt that too. I jumped all over getting to do a preview of Atlantic City. Like, it was just like teams. Like, we won 73 games last year. It was just fun to write about them. Everybody's kind of got something going, like you said.
Yeah, I guess. We've run through a bunch of our topics here, and I think we should probably be coming to the end of this BBA today. So I will finish this I will bring us to the end by saying that, first off, there's still time for media guide submissions. If you come up with a fun, cool idea, zip it to me at my email address. Drop me it on Discord or whatever. Lots of fun things. Number two is you talk about previews. I mean, just pick a team and preview them. Usually we say it takes 48 hours or whatever to everyone claim their teams, but now that time has passed. If you get excited about a team, just write a preview. You don't even have to claim it, just do it. And it's a fun way to pick up extra PPT. So any last thoughts, Kurt, as we head toward true opening day?
You stole my thunder there. That was going to be my point. I love the team previews. I think you get 6 points for those. It's a great way to learn more about the league. If you're, really engaged, I'd encourage you probably to pick a team like in the other league. But if you just want to scout out your own division, just pick your rival in the division. Pick somebody else who's kind of in a similar spot to you, and you'll learn all kinds of things poring over other teams' rosters. I don't do it enough. I think the best GMs in the league probably spend a lot of time looking at other teams' rosters. I have to be kind of forced to, and a team preview does that. So encourage, like you said. I love it when there's 10 plus team previews posted out there. I really feel like you get a good feel for the league if you read those too.
Yeah, and just have fun with it. Graham did a brilliant job with his GBC thing. That was so much fun to read. They're actual previews, but they're also snarky and full of his thing using independent bands, indie bands is fantastic, right? I mean, that's something that he clearly knows a lot about, and he clearly had fun doing it. So, go outside of the bounds. You don't have to just sit down and do George is going to start at second base, and it's like, it all works. So
whatever
anyway,
you want to do.
Whatever you want to do. Thank you so much for your time here this morning, Kurt. It's been really great. Absolutely looking forward to the year, and we'll have to get together again next week and see how the month of April has rolled out. So have a great day.
Hey, you too. Looking forward to it.
Yep.